Uh, all right, we got David here. David, can you introduce yourself to the podcast here?
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name is David Freund. I grew up in South Florida. I currently live in Puerto Rico. I'm a real estate entrepreneur and investor, and I'm president of Brain Buffet Solutions, which is an education company focused on creating curriculum for software.
Nice. And let's talk about your childhood, right? So growing up, did you always have that real estate mindset, or anybody in your life that was all business related?
I don't think I was. I mean, my mom is a real estate broker, so I've always kind of been familiar with like the real estate industry, but more as like it from the transaction side, not necessarily from the investment side. Um, and yeah, my mom's always kind of had her own like businesses as I was growing up. So I would say she's probably the most like entrepreneurial person within my family.
Yeah.
The rest of my family, they're pretty just straightforward, like teachers, educators,
Yeah.
So I think I'm considered like the black sheep in the family in terms of just being like self-employed and much more entrepreneurial.
That's exciting. So did you always want it to be like entrepreneurial whenever you're like in high school? Like how did that route change?
I was that kid in school like selling like candy bars, so I was
Nice.
the kid like showing up with like a backpack full of candy bars and maybe making a couple $100 a day doing that. And I mean, I just had so many businesses like through high school, like a landscaping business. I did that for a while, just like mowing lawns. And then when I got into like video production, I started like going to like nightclubs, uh, just any sort of like event and making promotional videos at that time, and just like so many different things. And then also working like jobs like in high school, like I worked at Costco, I was a lifeguard. And then towards like my sophomore junior year of high school, I started becoming familiar with website development, like specifically with WordPress. So back then I just started building websites for like small companies, and that was like the main thing that I kind of stuck through college.
Okay. And what did you go to college for?
So I went to the University of Central Florida. I got my degree, my bachelor's in marketing. I did a minor in international business. And then there's a sales program over there. It's like a pretty challenging like 1 year sales program that I was involved with over there. And then I studied abroad in Beijing and Shanghai.
Nice.
So I got a little bit of international business experience from that trip. And then, man, just totally fell in love with Asia and ended up just going out to Southeast Asia every single year. And I started a company called Globalized Citizen. And the whole idea behind that was running like adventure backpacking tours for young adults. And then that kind of transitioned into running study abroad programs as a vendor for UCF. And yeah, from there, I got some opportunities to develop out some web applications for college professors, and that turned into like a pretty valuable business opportunity. So I ended up just kind of transitioning and moving away from doing like the travel business back into going back into web. Yeah.
And whenever you were opening up these businesses, did you have any fears going into it?
I mean, there's constant like uncertainty, like even now, right? Like I mean, I think overall I'm a small fish compared to like many large enterprises, right? But that's the thing about entrepreneurship is like you never really have certainty, right? With like your income or job security, right? But at the same time, like I've worked for like larger companies as well, and I'm not really sure if that job security is ever really there. But yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing about being an entrepreneur, and it's something I still deal with today, right, is like knowing what to do, right, and being your own boss and staying like motivated and driven and inspired and living with a lot of uncertainty and starting your own business. I mean, I think right now it's increasingly becoming more challenging to start your own business. Like, sure, there's information out there, but I mean, it is ultra competitive. So you really have to like kind of narrow down on like what your niche is, right? And try to drive value that way. Like from my experience, I built probably 100 different websites for like many different small businesses, and they're all, not large projects per se. But then, you go and build something for one, high value client, right? And that one client can produce 80% of the income compared to all your rest of your clients. So that was kind of the thing for me, was like, man, I hit a couple of unicorns,
Hmm.
but it's like, how do you scale that?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the most challenging things. Like anyone who wants to get into entrepreneurship, right? Like, I understand why it's like appealing and why it's sexy for them, but damn, like, you'll be trading a 40-hour a work week job for, 70
Yeah.
and have half
Yeah.
the certainty, right?
Yeah. People just don't understand that you're actually working a lot harder, right? Like
Yeah.
instead of what you said, instead of 40 hours, you're gonna be working 70 hours. And it is a bit stressful, but if you have the right systems in place, like from the book The E-Myth, right? You're
Mhm.
doing everything that in that business, but if you put people in certain areas that bring in the who's instead of doing everything by yourself. And do you have anybody like are you employing anybody?
Yeah, so like, my main business, which is called Brain Buffet,
Hmm.
we have a full team over there that handles like web, content, administration, onboarding, customer support, and then we contract out subject matter experts as
Hmm.
well, to create a lot of our curriculum. And then we have some remote teams based out in Ukraine that also helps us with development as well. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of like my first move when I got involved with Brain Buffet, was I got to build a team. I'm okay with postponing profits, and keeping my own personal like salary ultra low and keeping the money in the business to grow the team. So that way we can have the processes in place. So that way when we do eventually scale, I can take income at that time. But yeah, on that business, we have a full team to support all those stakeholders.
Okay. And let's say
Yeah.
the 18 or the 19-year-old comes to you, hey David, right? How do I start hiring people out? Like what did you do to like if you were in my shoes, how did you go out there and start hiring people?
I mean, I would start off seeing if you are already producing income,
Hmm.
right? Because if you're not already generating revenue, you're not going to be able to support employees, right? Or contractors. So I would say, in the beginning, you kind of have to wear all the hats until you're at the point where you're generating revenue. And that revenue is at a point where you can bring somebody in to work in your business while you as an entrepreneur continue working on your business, right? Like going out, finding new accounts. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's where I would start, is like, if you're at the point where you're thinking of starting a business, or maybe you've already started, but you're not generating enough revenue, in my opinion, you're not at the point where you can hire. You have to be at the point where, okay, you have a steady stream of revenue to be able to support the cost. Because, you know, the team for Brain Buffet, for example, that is the most expensive part of operating our business. It's like
Yeah.
our manpower. Yeah. So if you can just keep it lean in the beginning, that's a good way of doing it. And, the founder of Brain Buffet, he was actually one of my former teachers. That's what he did, for the better part of 10 years. And he never really grasped the skills to be able to build out a team. And I mean, fast forward 10 years later, this man ended up like working himself into a stroke. Like he literally had a stroke. He was just working, you know, so much on the business. It's so stressful, where you kind of have to find that balance where once you are at the point where you can hire, and free yourself up with time, like that's the time I think to hire. Whereas like even where we're at right now, like we're not going to hire anymore until we're at a position where we're actually growing the business, right?
Mhm.
And then we'll just keep the funds reinvested back in. So
And then
yeah.
from there, like how did you're doing all this business stuff. How did you end up doing real estate? What got you to do real estate?
Yeah. So I bought my first property. It was, I believe, April 2019. It was new construction. So I got the contract on it. I want to say it was around May of 2018. And, this property, my plan was just, it was going to be my forever home. I was going to live in it myself. So, the nice thing about new construction at that time was like, you can lock in the price today for a completion 8 months from now. The risk is that, you don't really know where interest rates are going to be at,
Mhm.
right? Like that was my number one concern at that time. So when I was saving up for that, I was actually just working. I had a contracted job with a company called Wiley Education Services. They hired me to be their digital asset manager and basically integrate a software from IBM that we just contracted. I was just working that job, and it was like a mid-level salary type of job, and I was just keeping my personal cost of living super low, and just saving up for that down payment. So by the time that I got to close on that property in 2019, I think I put down, I want to say like 40%, something like that. And then I was able to rent 2 of the rooms to my good friends. And then from a cash flow perspective, I just broke even.
Mhm.
But that was huge for me because I'm like, okay, now, I live out on my own. I'm not necessarily paying for rent, right? Because cash flow is breaking even. So, I'm able to keep that, what I would have spent on rent, back reinvested. And then of course, getting the benefit of amortization and appreciation. So that was kind of like the very first property. And yeah, I just house hacked it. And the community that I ended up investing in, the largest home builder in America, it's a company called Mattamy Home. They were the ones doing this construction project in this community called Tapestry. And I mean, they were building out, I don't know what the exact number is, but maybe 4,000 homes, something like that. And it was out of 5 phases, and I got in on phase 3. And my hypothesis was, if I can get in around phase 3, I know the builders are going to keep pushing the pricing up because they're obviously trying to maximize their profits as cost of materials go up. They're going to reflect that in their new pricing. And it ended up working out pretty well because, like, the first place I bought it for like $275, and right now it's worth like $425. So I saw like that really nice run up in appreciation between the home builders pushing up pricing, because like once the community is fully constructed, there is no more supply. The demand is still there because it's still a highly desirable neighborhood.
Mhm.
And I just had a feeling it was going to push prices up. So I was right in that aspect. But what I was not expecting was this massive COVID run up, that really started in March 2020. That's really what kind of, I think at that time, like March 2020, the property was probably worth like 320.
Okay.
Something like that. Like I got it for 275, and then by that time it was like 320, and then the COVID run up, brought it all the way up to about 425 now. So that was kind of like the story behind like the first property.
And how long did it take
Yeah.
you to get to your second property?
So the first property I bought out completely, on my own. I put 40% down. I'm pretty sure it's 40% leverage, like 60 on that. And then that was in April of 2019. And then I bought my second property on December 30th of that same year.
Mhm.
So roughly like 8 months later, approximately. And with that one, I ended up buying in the same neighborhood, right down the street. And I met a seller who, I didn't buy this one from the builder. I bought it from an owner, like another seller. And he was trying to underprice his property to be under the builders, right? Which makes sense because you're not gonna be able to price at or above the builders. You have to price below. And he had like a personal situation going on. So I was able to work out a deal where I put down 20% on that property. And I actually had a partner who came in with me, and he put down 20. And we ended up just splitting everything 50-50 at that time, even though I was the one doing all the work of finding the deal, negotiating the deal, getting everything to closing. Because I wanted the experience. Like, you can read all the books you want, and you can be on Bigger Pockets and watch their courses, like do all of that stuff. And there's a lot of valuable information in there for sure. But actually going through and doing a deal and having the experience, that's really where a lot of my learning came in.
Mhm.
So that's how I ended up closing the second deal. I put 20% down. My partner put down 20%, leveraged out 60% on that one. And it was cash flowing like a little bit. I mean, I don't remember at the time, maybe like $100, 150 a month, maybe 200, something like that. But for us, it was more of the hypothesis saying, hey, look, we think the value of these properties are going to get pushed up when this community gets finished. And yeah, it was like the same situation. We got that one for like 240, and right now it's worth like around 400.
Nice.
Um, so I ended up doing like kind of replicating that model a couple times, where I was working with a partner to match me on down payments. And then eventually, like a year after doing that, he saw a really nice appreciation run, just like I did. And I was actually able to work out a deal to purchase out his equity by
Mhm.
giving him a down payment on his portion of the equity and then doing an owner finance deal on the difference, right? And then once I did that, I was able to quit claim all the properties under my name.
Yeah.
And then I did a cash out refinance and all of so I re-leveraged because as you know, in March 2020, rates shot down very low. So pretty much all throughout 2020 and 2021, I was working on getting these properties refinanced at that time, and then all the capital that I pulled out, I ended up moving it from Florida over to Texas
Mhm.
to buy up fourplexes over there that were then re-leveraged.
So did you pay back when you refinanced, did you repay back the owner financing, or was that
No, so
uh,
I was able to work out a nice term there where I did an aggressive down payment on his equity at the time. I think I want to say I put down like 20 or 25%. I think the value of the equity, his portion of the equity at that time was maybe 400,000, something
yeah,
like that, approximately. So I think I worked out where I put down 80 on that, like 20%, and then I think I owner financed like the difference, the 320 at a fixed rate, and I was able to actually work out a 10+ year term on that. So the way I was looking at it was, hey, I'm willing to do this. He can get paid his fixed interest rate, which he was happy about because it was above the cash on cash anyways.
mhm,
Um, to be able to pull out all the equity, re-leverage everything, and then move the equity into a brand new market where I knew I could get higher cash flow, and then essentially re-leverage that. So that's exactly what I did. Was I ended up refinancing, I think it was like 3 or 4 properties in Central Florida. I was able to do like 75% loan to value on those. I probably pulled out around like maybe 600K, something
yeah,
like that. And then I just basically brought the 600K back to the bank and said, hey, I want to buy up these properties in Texas. And I think I did around like 1.5, 1.6 million in new acquisitions in a new market using that capital. So like when I step back now where I'm at, it's like I definitely wish cash flow was a lot more aggressive.
yeah,
Part of this too is like I'm currently doing a project in Puerto Rico with a 9-unit apartment building over there that just requires a lot of liquidity like upfront, and it's been that way for the last year and a half as I finish up this renovation. But I know like in the long term, once that project is completed, because there's no leverage on it, it's just going to cash flow really well to help stabilize the entire portfolio. So the way I look at it is like I'm okay with like going into negative cash flow on one property to reinvest that capital into other properties that positive cash flow, just knowing that, hey, the amortization and the appreciation is building equity in the background. And
mhm,
then my long-term play is, of course, to overall build the cash flow position of the portfolio. Because I think the main key to this, right? Like if you're going to get into real estate and you're not going to be fearful of debt, right?
yeah,
I think the main play is like you just got to make sure you're solvent. As long as you can maintain solvency and you can continue paying all of your liabilities, and you have like a long-term game plan. For me, like I plan on holding all of these properties long term. Um, you'll get paid on the equity side. The cash flow is more about just having like a defense, like a barrier to maintain the entire portfolio.
mhm. And a lot of people are probably like wondering like how did you manage to like fund like 20%, 40% down on properties? Because a lot of these young guys in their 20s, they're like, I only got like 5K in my bank account or something.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to do anything with 5K,
Mhm.
right? 5, 10, 15, 20K even. Like I've had people hit me up and say, hey, like, I got 40K right now. What do you think I should do? I want to go buy a property. And it's like, to be honest with you, I would wait and just like, especially in like today's market right now, like to be transparent, where we're at right now as of July 2nd, right? 2022, I'm not buying property stateside right now. Um, interest rates are just, I know over the long term, interest rates are considered low right now. But when you look at affordability between where our interest rates are at right now and where pricing is at, I mean, the cap rates just aren't there, right? So I'm kind of like, I'm sure there's the diamond in the rough, or there is some situations out there where you can find a great deal, and people should definitely buy up those types of deals. But I think, in my opinion, those are outliers in today's market. So right now, like, I'm mainly focusing in Portugal. But much more attractive interest rates over there. I'm still finding deals there. And they have a nice program where you can actually leverage your investments and be able to get citizenship out there, because
Oh, nice.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of don't talk about this, but like, one of the downsides of starting your own business, I think, in my opinion, is healthcare, right? Like, healthcare is not as important when you're young, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only 27, but like, when I think about shit, maybe one day I want to get married or start a family or whatever, it's like, yeah, the healthcare situation in the United States is horrible. I mean, for being a developed nation, you kind of have to think more holistically about this. So the way I'm setting everything up is like, I can still be in the United States, running businesses, having clients and accounts, trying to make money, but my tax basis is not in the United States, right? I have my relationship set up with Puerto Rico, so that way ultimately all the funds move through Puerto Rico. I can just get taxed at my Puerto Rican rate instead of the United States federal rate, and then use those investments right now to deploy it into Portugal to of course get returns. Like, returns will be there, but I'm viewing this as it's so much more than returns. It's about the education system. It's about the healthcare system, living in a place that's safe, right? Like, I feel like we're not talking about this enough as entrepreneurs. It's like, do we really want to live in a place where like the gun violence is like as prevalent as it is, right? Like, especially if you're going to have kids, right? I would be terrified right now to be sending my kids to school,
Like schools, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why, like, when I was talking to my girlfriend about this a couple months ago, and it's like, when interest rates started going up really high and returns are getting crushed, and I couldn't find anything in the States worth buying, as of March. And it's like, I got to think of returns on real estate differently, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be through profit, but if it gives me citizenship, right? Where if it gives me citizenship, or if it gives me a better tax standing, right, over the long term, like, these are the types of different ways to start thinking about profit in real estate.
Yeah, I actually never thought of that. Like, that's actually pretty cool where you can actually get your citizenship by just owning real estate
Yeah,
at a different country. That's interesting.
totally.
And
Like,
with your first and second property, right? Did you how basically how did you I guess, like, going back to the original funding question, right? Is it mostly
yeah.
with like, did you do any like unique like funding for it, like such as like partnerships or anything? Like, how did that go? Or were you like that grinder where you like ramen noodles and then save up as much money? Uh
Um, I'm kind of in the middle with all of it. So like, the first deal, um, that was just me, like, at the time. I mean, I went through a hard breakup during that time, like in 2018. Me and my girlfriend, who were together for 5 years at the time, broke up. So we were living in an apartment, and that got super messy. So I was young, right? I think I was 23,
mhm.
about. Yeah, I think I was about 23. So I had to like suck up my pride, and I asked my parents if I could move back home for like 6 months, until, because I already had that at that time the property under contract. I was just waiting for it to be built. So at that time, that money came from just working, man, like keeping costs low, saving up the difference between income and expenses, and then I ended up just reinvesting all of that. So like, I was kind of running multiple things, because I was working the contracted job with Wiley. I was building out websites for third-party companies. I kind of had my side thing, my travel business on the side, right? So I kind of had like multiple sources of income. But at that time, I don't think I was making over 100,000 a year. I think my salary at the time was probably like 60, and then everything else was just coming from like the side businesses. So yeah, with that, I didn't do anything special per se. Like it was just grinding, saving
Yeah.
money, trying to keep expenses low. But at the same time, I was never like a ramen noodles like every single night type of person.
Hmm.
I always viewed travel as being super important. Like for me to like at this point in my life, I've traveled 69 countries
Nice.
all over the world, and it's given me like a whole perspective of travel and life and work-life balance, right? And I never felt like real estate should come over my ability to go out and experience the world. I believe like you can have your cake and you can eat it too, and it's about finding balance in that. And so, during that time, I was probably spending maybe like $8,000 a year just on traveling, and I would usually like fly out to Southeast Asia, stay in like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, that whole region of the world where it's like relatively affordable to be. And, I would spend months at a time out there just exploring, traveling, making connections. So I kind of always baked that into my budget. That kind of came first for me. And then everything else that I was able to make and still travel, yeah, I would put it all into real estate.
Nice. Yeah.
So on the second deal, I didn't have all the money for that. I had by December of that year, I had 20% to put down, so I had like 50 grand, and then my partner came in with another 50 grand. So I think we ended up doing 100 down on that, and then we financed 140 on that
Hmm.
on that second deal. Yeah.
Okay. And what got you into becoming like a digital nomad?
I think in the beginning it was about the 4-hour work week. Like I
Yeah.
read that with Tim Ferriss, like I think I was like a sophomore in high school. And at that time, so this would have been like around 2010. This is before becoming a digital nomad was like cool or was a thing. Like I think Instagram just started at that time, like in 2009. So there weren't these like influencers like that. And I just love this idea of like the main thing that stuck with me was, of course, location independence. I think is the most important. Like I value location independence more than money for me.
Hmm.
Like if someone were to give me, let's say I had to start brand new and I had the option of having location independence and making $40,000 a year, or having to be dependent of one specific office that I had to drive to every single day, making 80, I'm going to choose the location independence. And that's just kind of my philosophy, because I'd rather take my currency, maybe go to a place that, I have that leverage, or maybe I'd rather move to a place where, hey, instead of being taxed at, I don't know, 25%, 30%, I can be taxed at 4%, or I can be taxed at 0%, right? Like that's a huge thing to take into account. So yeah, I think it was the 4-hour work week totally opened up my eyes to it. As soon as I graduated high school, I left for Europe for several months, just backpacking over there, becoming familiar with travel. And then at that point, man, I was just hooked. Like I was totally hooked on traveling and backpacking and trying to just get as much experience as possible. And that's pretty much what I started doing when I was 18. And I mean, 10 years later, right? Like I'm 27 and I'm still doing these types of trips. It's like I said, it's more important than money to me.
Yeah. And what do you think
Yeah.
people should get out of like whenever they travel? Should they like try to meet new people, like try the food? Like what do you think people should actually like take in while they're going out to these new countries?
Yeah, I think every person's different, right? So for me, I'm very unorthodox in terms of like just like lifestyle design, like retirement plan, like what I do for work, like all of that. I find myself to be unorthodox. So the things that have brought value to me over the years is being okay and almost like with intention, putting myself in uncomfortable situations.
Hmm.
Just traveling around the world and going to some really unorthodox places. You just definitely end up in uncomfortable situations. So I found a lot of value in that, like going to places that I think most people would be scared of, you
Can,
know?
can you give an example of a
Yeah, I can
place?
give you some examples. Okay, so for example, when I was in college, so um, my my dad's side of the family is Jewish, but
Yeah.
he's not religious at all. So I kind of always like grew up knowing like I'm Jewish, but I don't really know what that means. I don't live in a religious household, whatever, right? So when I got to college, I saw that, you know, there was these birthright trips to do free trips to Israel. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I love traveling, and if you're gonna send me over there for free, you know, let's do it. So, you know, I did that trip, and it was a really cool experience, meeting a lot of different people, but I felt more confused, I think, coming back from that trip than like I had more questions coming back than I did like going into it. And for me, I think one of the big things was like, why did I not have like any experiences with Palestinians when I was there? Like, if land is supposedly the center of this conflict, right? Why are we not interacting with Palestinians while we're on these trips? Like, I remember talking to one guy who was like handpicked, and he was like a doctor, and he gave a presentation, but like that was it. So the following year, I said to one of my friends, I was like, we got to go back. Like, I got to go back to Israel. I need to cross the West Bank. We have to go into Palestine. We need to get into Ramallah, and we need to like really feel what it's like to be there. And it totally, I mean, for me, like crossing the West Bank, I think it was kind of like an intense experience, with just like the chaos and how unorganized it was. And this is still going on, but like, you know, there were those Israeli settlements coming up in Ramallah and all around the West Bank. So there were like kind of just daily tensions there. But once I was in Ramallah, and able to sit down and talk, and man, I met like so many amazing people, and actually had a really amazing time. And I don't want to get political, but like I came back from that experience saying, you know what, I don't necessarily want to be involved with these organizations after having my direct experiences there. You know what I'm saying? So I think some people would be scared to go to places like that. You know, for me, like I've been to like Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh is like a very crazy, like in Dhaka, the capital, crazy. You know, just different experiences like in Egypt, Myanmar, Laos. You know, I've had just like different travels throughout the Middle East that were, you know, really cool. A bit in like North Africa. So it's like most people, for example, they've never even considered, you know, maybe going to Bangladesh, right? So like when you're okay with like saying, hey, I'm okay with putting myself in uncomfortable situations, and just seeing like how raw everything is, like how raw life is for these people, to feel the pollution and the density and the poverty. And for me, like I've gone into slums, like in India. Like I think of the slum that I went into in Agra, and I see these like naked kids living in sewage with like bloated stomachs, like clearly starving, right? And then, but at the same time, you can see how happy some of these people are. I'm not saying like those people specifically, but I'm saying like when you travel, and you definitely see people living below the poverty threshold, and you see how happy some of these people are, you start asking yourself, like, maybe you're frustrated or anxious because of the level of ambitions you have. You want to be this multimillionaire that is financially free and have X amount in cash flow. Meanwhile, these people live on dirt floors, and they're just like the humblest, happiest people. And it's like, you start thinking about this whole game of capitalism that we play in the States. And I think we look at entrepreneurs or anyone who's like making a lot of money as being like role models, right?
Being successful,
but I think sometimes we have to zoom out a bit and just say, is this really what we want to be doing, right? Is this whole capitalistic game really what the game we want to be playing? Maybe there's other ways that we can structure our lives, you know, so we're not so dependent to this game of just making money, right? When is enough? That is a question I think I keep asking myself and asking my mentors. It's like, I don't think I have what it takes to become a billionaire. I don't think I have what it takes to, I don't think I'm willing to sacrifice what it takes to become a billionaire, right? When it comes to like time, health, family, like all that stuff. So it's like, what are you willing to sacrifice to, like, at what level is enough? I think that's really clear, really important to have that clarity. Because it's crazy. Like, you can have these ambitions to make $1 million, and then you make $1 million and you realize, damn, I am so far from where I want to be still. You know?
I guess a lot of
Yeah.
people, they have to be like goal setting, right? See where you really want to go. Since like if you look at examples like Elon Musk, right? Like he's not chasing money, right? Is that he's trying to get to Mars, and then somehow money just lands on his feet. He's like, oh, it works out. Like a lot of people, they're like, okay, I want to become a millionaire, but if that's your goal, it's going to be quick, right? Becoming a millionaire. I'm not saying it's like easiest thing, but if you put in the right effort in, you'll get there. But if you're trying to challenge yourself, try
Yeah.
to get a goal, right? Like, oh, I want to open up jobs for 200 people. Let's see if you can do that. Or just like become like the biggest networker and be like a politician in your local area. Like something that's like the 10x, I guess, like goal
Yeah.
that you would want. And if people wanted to like do this whole nomadic lifestyle that you are doing, David, what are some
Hmm.
steps that they should be taking towards that?
I think the first step to take is okay, if you want to have location independence, 90% of the jobs that are out there won't work. 90% of the jobs require you to be at some specific location. So I think narrowing down on what opportunities are out there so you can maintain location independence. The same is true for entrepreneurship. Like if if I'm saying that location independence is more important to me than making money, I'm not going to go start a coffee shop.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or some service-based business that I'm dependent on being like a car washing business or a landscaping business. Like, sure, you could probably hire somebody to serve that managerial role, but then we're not talking about like a startup. We're talking about like a more established business. Like maybe you're going and acquiring a business that already exists, that already cash flows, that you can already have a manager in place to do that. So I would say if you can get really clear on what you don't want to do, like most people don't know what they want to do. Like
Yeah.
I say, hey, I'm as a person and as a human, I'm always changing. Like
Yeah.
every day, right? Like these chemicals in my brain are totally making me look at the world differently and say, is this what I see myself doing for the next 5 years? What changes can I make to get myself closer to my goals, right? So I think sometimes it's easier being super clear on what you don't want to do. And that kind of helps you figure out what you do want to do. So by me saying, hey, first of all, I have to be location independent. That is a non-negotiable for me. That wiped out 90% of the options on the table. And then I
Mhm.
only had 10% to continue narrowing it down. So, as I was considering all the different options, the one that kind of was most appealing to me, at least in the beginning, was, man, if I could just learn how to code, like if I could just learn web development and be able to get myself a job at $20 an hour remote, which is like super low for being a developer
Yeah.
in today's market. Like in theory, I should be able to have location independence and be able to pay for food, shelter, and water, especially if I'm earning dollars and I'm spending Thai baht or Indonesian rupee or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So yeah, I would say that's kind of like the first thing is like write down your non-negotiables. For me, it was about location independence. For other people, that might be the case, or maybe for them, it's like I don't want to work for an asshole, right? Like I don't want to work in an environment where like I can't stand the people I work for, or I'm not aligned with what it is we are doing, right? So like right now, I work with my best friend. Like during that growth period of, okay, we're making revenue, it's time to hire. It's like I want to work with people that I enjoy
Mhm.
being around, right? So I hired my most talented friends, maintain location independence, right? And then I'm highly aligned with the value that we're bringing. So like we teach kids how to get certified in software, right? So like
Nice.
let's say you want to get certified in Photoshop and you want that to be on your resume, or Premiere or After Effects or Dreamweaver, whatever it is, Microsoft Office application. We teach kids not only how to become proficient in those softwares, but actually how to prepare and take the industry certification exam. So from a values perspective, like I love the model. Like if I can do something and I know like, hey, it's going to impact, 50, 70, 80,000 kids who are going to take this course. That's really rewarding for me, because I think if I didn't have that, I think I'd burn out. Like, I don't think I'd be as motivated to continue working as hard as I do if like I didn't feel like, okay, my work is definitely making a really positive change, like a really great positive change in tens of thousands of students, you know?
Yeah. And do you think like, uh, do you miss anything that you get from being like, I guess like being sedentary? Do you miss anything from that?
I think the hardest thing about like remote work or being a digital nomad is, and most people don't talk about this, is you lose your routine,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yeah.
the most basic things of like waking up, going to sleep around the same time, being in your bed, being able to exercise, like maybe you're going to a gym, like your gym or whatever, right? Um, Being able to go to the grocery store to get the foods that you expect all the time or whatever, right? Like shaping those things into a routine, I think is like really critical to quality of life. Um, and if you are always traveling and always on the go and you're changing your location, I don't know, every 5 days, every 7 days, something like that, it becomes super challenging to have that routine, as well as relationships too, right? Like if sure you're meeting a lot of people, but you know, in the beginning days, I was traveling solo many times, you know, and so that can become exhausting and lonely. And you meet somebody great, but then you know you're leaving to a different place, and then maybe you get into a relationship, but maybe your girlfriend, for example, doesn't have location independence, right? Like maybe her job forces her to be in one location. So then it's like, what do you do in those situations? Are you in a long distance relationship, right? So I think that's kind of like the most common challenges is like like maintaining relationships, of course, and then I think routine, right? Like being able to maintain that routine. And then lastly, I would say it's making money, right? Like, yeah, sure, you're in these locations, but are you able to maintain your income so you can have a sustainable way of like maintaining that lifestyle? These are all these extra variables that you have to consider. But I'm still trying to figure that out. Like for me, my solution is I'm trying not to jump around as much. So like if I go to a place, I'm gonna kind of stay there for a
Mhm.
while and get comfortable. And you know, my goal used to be I want to travel to every single country in the world. You know, and I had that goal when I was younger. That is not my goal anymore. Like I find that goal to be super exhausting, and you don't drive as much value from each location when you kind of have that mindset.
Yeah.
Where me, it's like, you know, I just want to be comfortable. I want to live in a place where I can eat good, work out, you know, have all of those main pillars of quality of life, safety, right, resources. Um, that's kind of where I'm at now. Like for where I'm at right now, I don't really have interest in traveling to super dangerous places in Africa, for example. Like
Mhm.
I'm very happy, um, you know, just doing what I'm doing in Puerto Rico and Portugal, and you know, just maintaining location independence, but not necessarily being obligated to
Yeah.
travel every 5 days, you know?
I do like what you said though, like how people just don't understand that they are sacrificing the
Yeah.
things that you have around you. Because guess what? If you go to somewhere like Bangladesh, right, there's no Planet Fitness around the corner,
No.
or at a grocery store, they won't count your macros or calories that you would need. So it's like you get what you get. And I guess a lot of people don't understand. I do like that you did say that, and that you're not blinding people about like, hey, it's fantastic, right? But again, someone like David here, he loves like traveling, right? So it's like you can't. But if you're like that person that's like, hey, I want to try it out, right? You're gonna realize like it's not like burning yourself out, but you might have a dislike, and you may be the type of person that wants to be sedentary, maybe go to the gym every day and like have
Yeah.
those types of stuff. Uh,
No. You know, there's different people in the world, right? Like I find myself to be unorthodox. So those types of experiences, like when I'm traveling and I'm able to just pick up on a whole bunch of new experiences, like I thrive in that environment. Whereas, you know, when I was running the travel company, I had those travelers who are just like, they want their comforts that they're used to in the States, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, I think at the end of the day, even if you're not traveling, I still highly value location independence because maybe I don't know, you're living in Texas and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm kind of tired of this. Maybe I want to live in Miami, or I want to live in Colorado and go snowboarding, right? Like you don't have to be traveling around the world. I think just focusing on location independence, so at any time you could pick up and change your environment or live where you're treated best. I think that's super important.
Nice. And what are some systems that you have in place for your businesses, such as your real estate, whenever you're doing this type of lifestyle where you're like away a lot? Do you have like property managers in place?
Yeah, I have property managers on all the properties. I always say you want to be a property owner, you don't want to be a property manager, unless property management is your business. But like when it comes to owning and controlling assets, maybe if like you're one of those people who like you don't want to travel and you have multiple properties, you know, very close to you, and you're going to be there anyways, and you're already highly educated on property management, and maybe you have like a wife who can help you in those types of situations, like, okay, fine, maybe manage your own properties. But from my experience, like especially early on, all the mistakes that I made in the beginning all related to property management. To me, like the worst part about real estate lies within property management. And if you don't get the right tenant in there, you don't do the right screening process, you don't have the right vendors for maintenance and management in place, like you're going to end up paying more, you know, long term. So yeah, I have managers on all the properties.
Nice. And do you believe like money, is there any hard problems that money can't solve?
Are there any what problems?
Like hard problems that you may have that money can't solve?
I mean, there's a lot of things money can't solve, right? Like, yeah, I mean, on the personal side, right? Like money doesn't buy happiness. I think that's really straightforward. Like, money also brings more problems. Like, like if, for example, if you were to make $2 million today, the first thing you're going to probably figure out is, what do I need to do so the government doesn't take half of it?
Yeah.
That's a hard problem to solve, right? And I spent over a year trying to figure out this problem, right? And it's like, I don't have an issue necessarily with like paying taxes. I think taxes are like super important in keeping a society together. Like when I've traveled Scandinavia, like a lot of the Scandinavian countries, and I see like, wow, okay, their effective tax rate is 50% plus, but incredible infrastructure, best healthcare system in the world, best education system in the world, clean streets, really nice, safe environment. People that, like, I'm not anti-guns, right? But I'm anti-mass shootings. There's no mass shootings going on over there. It's a very safe place to live. It's like, hell yeah, you know what? I'd be thrilled to pay 50% to live in a society where I know my kids are taken care of and I know my neighbors are taken care of, right? In our situation, it's completely different, because the thing that's unique about America is America doesn't give a shit where you live in the world, man. Like, you could be living in Thailand, the majority of the year. And sure, there's a foreign exclusion deduction, which I think is good for like maybe 150, 170,000 a year. But after that, the United States will literally say, we don't care that you haven't set foot one day in America. We're going to still tax you as an American citizen, even though you're abroad. That is uniquely American. Okay. On top of that, I mean, right now we're spending close to, I think it's over 40% of our federal budget goes to the military. And I was looking through your Instagram, I see you're in the military, right? And it's like, I think last year's budget, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was around 750 billion, something like that we spent on defense. We got this raging war going on in Ukraine that we're sending tons of resources to. Meanwhile, our currency is just, we're in hyperinflation right now. Like, all that shit is being underreported. Like, yeah, they're saying it was 8 points, whatever, trending last month on an annual basis. But come on, like, we've all been to the grocery store, the bottle of orange juice. Yeah, man, the gallon of milk that was like 275 is now like 6 something. Like, we're not stupid. We know that this inflation rate is crazy, right? So when I look at this and I think, like, extrapolate this another 10, 20, 30 years with these corporate bailouts, right? Dude, the value of the dollar is going to rapidly deteriorate. I think it's at risk of being replaced as the international currency. Like, these are my opinions of, like, when I think of the next 30 years, right? And we're not even talking about global warming. like our largest problem right now to deal with. So when I think of these things, it's like being taxed in America is an option. Like it is totally an option. Like most people think that they're totally stuck within this tax system, but like I ended up going out to Panama, the country, to go set up my business out there and figure out everything with my lawyers out there on how to avoid these taxes. And I had to denounce my U.S. citizenship as part of that. And I'm like, there's no way I'm willing to denounce my U.S. citizenship because, hey, that's one of the most powerful passports in the world. Like it's up there. U.S. lending is world class. Like our ability to take debt to acquire assets is very well established here in America. And that is something of value. So I was like, you know what? No, I'm not willing to give up my passport. So I kind of came back from that trip feeling like really defeated. And my girlfriend, who's Puerto Rican, is like, hey, like, you know, Puerto Rico is like a tax haven, right? And I'm like, I have no idea how that works. And she basically showed me how, like, hey, if we actually go relocate there, move the business there, we didn't have to buy property, that was optional, but you know, we decided to, that I can completely avoid federal taxes legally, and I can just be billed at a fixed rate in Puerto Rico. Dude, she told me about that October, it was Halloween 2020, and we moved on New Year's, January 1st, 2021. Like it happened real fast. So that experience made me realize, like, dang, we can, the 4-hour work week and the idea of location independence, that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
We can choose where we make money. We can choose where we're taxed. We can choose where we get healthcare from. We don't have to rely on this country for healthcare or education, right? We can go set ourselves up in Portugal, and you don't have to go buy real estate over there. There's multiple different ways to get citizenship over there. So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like, dang, you can take a globalized approach to every like major, what I call the major pillars of quality of life, right?
So, let me hear you guys. So you basically put your business in Puerto Rico and you're not even getting taxed from the US anymore?
Correct.
Nice. That's
yeah. When it comes to earned income, I don't get taxed from the state.
See, that's some things that the benefits of like putting your business or anything like outside of the country. That's pretty cool to know. And well, what do you have to basically establish that again, you said buying real estate there is optional. What do you need specifically? Do you need like rent out like a little warehouse or something? Like how does that work?
No. So like the first thing that I want to say is like, this is a very sensitive subject, right? Like I imagine when you publish this, there's going to be Puerto Ricans listening in on this. So I want to preface by saying this is a very sensitive subject where I was not aware of a lot of the challenges, you know, that Puerto Ricans face prior to me actually moving there. Okay. In terms of like gentrification, getting priced out of markets, like Puerto Rico is part of the United States, right? It's a commonwealth of the United States, which in my opinion is just a fancy word for colony, right? And it's going through a lot of challenges. It has been going through a lot of challenges. So I just want to start by saying, like, there are a group of Puerto Ricans who don't necessarily welcome Americans moving to the island because of, hey, we're being priced out of the market. This is gentrification. This is just another form of colonialism, because a lot of the incentives that Puerto Rico offers, they do not offer those same incentives to Puerto Rican, right? So I just want to be really clear about that in the beginning, because I don't want anyone to think I'm being disrespectful. This whole experience has been eye-opening, right? I've gained so much education about a lot of the challenges that Puerto Ricans go through. So to break it down, everything kind of falls under what's called the Act 60 umbrella. And under Act 60, there are multiple different types of incentives. I think the most popular one is probably going to be Act 22. That is a 0% on capital gains. So for example, if you're a stock trader, a crypto trader, and anything like that, you can basically get residency in the States, and then you would pay 0% on those gains in that situation.
That's really interesting. So
yeah.
So basically, if you just lived in Puerto Rico, and you did like a lot of stock trading, you just won't get taxed at all. For those that,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah, stocks, crypto,
Anything with capital gain, of course.
yeah, anything with capital gains. Like even if you bought real estate in Puerto Rico and you're selling for profit,
Mhm.
you're not going to get taxed on those capital gains. Um,
And
you know,
where did you learn these like acts of laws and all that for taxes? Is there a book or
yeah,
anything
and
for that?
yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, it was actually my girlfriend who made me aware of it because she's
Mhm.
from Puerto Rico. And then she started showing me the information online. And then we contacted lawyers and then relocation agencies who specialize in this stuff. So all that learning kind of happened towards the end of 2020. And, basically, you just have to be a Puerto Rican resident. So you have to live there at least 6 months a year. You have to be registered to vote. So you will lose your ability to vote federally, which I
Yeah,
love, in my opinion.
yeah.
Like, I think it's important for Puerto Ricans to have representation and the ability to vote. But for
Mhm.
me personally, that I can just take a step away from all the political stuff and just say, hey, sorry, I no longer, have representation. I can't do that. So yeah, 6 months a year. Act 22, I'm sorry, the capital gains one, that one does require you to purchase a property. They don't specify how much, what type, any of that. Just it has to be a property, some real estate that you're acquiring. And then I think they require like a $10,000 a year donation to some charity, something like that. So you end up with these like just massive hedge fund managers who are just like raking in a lot of money, who are being based out of Puerto Rico. The other common one is called Act 20. And this is what I'm on, which is you go and create a Puerto Rican entity. You live there 6 months a year. There's a whole array of different services that your company can offer, from consulting to e-commerce to pretty much everything in between. And then with that, you're not required to buy. You have to be there 6 months a year. No requirement for annual donations or anything like that. And then you completely avoid federal taxes. And then you're just paying Puerto Rico a fixed 4% on your income, on your like dividends or distributions. And then of course, like they still expect you to pull a salary from your entity. So on that salary, you will be at a higher tax bracket where you have Social Security and Medicare. So there's no way of avoiding it on like your salary, but everything above your salary on the actual distribution. I mean, in my situation, I think I was at like a 34% tax rate on that, and then it dropped down to 4%.
Okay,
Yeah, so
that's pretty
huge help.
nice.
And then the last one that I want to mention that also falls under Act 60 is called Act 74. And this is another one that I'm doing, where if you want to go acquire a property and maybe remodel it, and like the one that I'm doing is specifically for a bed and breakfast. So you can do like a hybrid model between short-term rentals and long-term rentals in your property. The government will actually give you, for whatever you spent on the property, they'll give you 40% of that total value back to you in the form of a Puerto Rican tax credit.
Wow.
And then that tax credit can then be sold on a secondary market. Like let's say somebody in Puerto Rico has some tax bills, right? Well, instead of just paying that tax bill, they can go to this market and buy tax credits, which are usually like 90 to 92 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
So when you receive these 40% tax credits, like let's say for easy numbers, you did a project and it was $1 million, let's say, between the acquisition and the remodel, you're going to receive approximately $400,000 in tax credits. You can go sell that on the secondary market, let's say at 90%. So you could actually liquidate $360,000. So when people talk about like the Burr model, for example, right? I think Puerto Rico is one of the best places in the world as an American to do Burr, because you can get the spread between your total cost and after repair value, right? So you're still going to have that spread there. You can still finance the property. Like if you want to do cash out refinance, you can still do that. But then on top of that, you get this nice kind of subsidy from the government, because hey, I mean, after Hurricane Maria, all these places were like really destroyed. So they're trying to incentivize investors to go in, acquire, remodel, and get these assets stabilized. So So yeah, that's Act 74. I think, you know, for real estate investors, that's that's a really good way of being able to make some serious money.
And how does one get involved in buying real estate in like countries like that, like Puerto Rico? Is it like, are they all on like Zillow or anything like that? Or is it like a special website for that? And do you have to be a
Um,
citizen? You say you don't have to be a citizen to buy properties there, right?
so I want to start off by saying Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So
Yeah.
Puerto Rico is not a separate country per
Mhm.
se, right? Like you can travel to Puerto Rico just on your driver's license.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the lending is also federally regulated, although there are some situations where like the points that they can charge for origination is not federally regulated, so you can end up with some expensive loans out there. But I mean, the process I think is the same in terms of anywhere else that you would go, right? Like ideally, you would want to have your lenders, your real estate brokers, your property managers in place. I would recommend going there, spending time, understanding every different municipality street by street, so you can understand the market, right? Like I spent about 6 to 7 months just staying on the island, figuring everything out before I put anything under contract.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it works the same way like in any other country too? Like, I don't know how, like, where did you find a real estate agent there, or did you go through online to find properties?
It was both over there, and the property that I ended up buying, I was just driving by and I saw like a 7-day sign, and so I ended up like talking to the owners and seeing the property right then and there, and I ended up not even negotiating with them. I just felt like the price that they were asking for that property and the potential it had. I knew that their agent wanted to represent both sides of the deal, which is super common in Puerto Rico.
Really?
Yeah, co-broke on properties, on transactions is actually pretty rare over there. So I kind of already went in there like having a feeling that I wasn't going to have that representation on the deal. But yeah, on that one, I mean, I was just walking the street and I saw the 7-day sign, and I knew the location, and I saw the potential, and I said, hey, I'm going to give you exactly what you're going to ask for, what you're asking for. And we just did that one as like a cash deal. Now, every country per se is going to be different. So I don't know anything about buying property outside of the United States, Puerto Rico, and now Portugal. Portugal is pretty open arms to allowing foreigners to come in and be able to get lending from Portuguese banks to acquire Portuguese real estate. That is pretty unique, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, like over there, I'd say in theory, it's kind of the same thing. Like I just got back from spending a month in Madeira, which is the island that I'm specifically looking, that I have a property under contract. And it was the same thing, like driving it, having multiple different agents I was working with, interviewing a ton of different banks, just becoming familiar with the market. It would be no different than you coming over to Florida right now if you were dead set on buying in Florida and just taking your time driving these streets, right?
Yeah.
I've never bought like property that I haven't been to, or like I've never bought something just based off of how it looks online. Like every property I've driven there, talked to the owners or the agents, toured the property. But yeah, I mean, I think David Green, the guy from Bigger Pockets, he has and man, what is that book called? Like long distance. Yeah, long distance real estate investing. A lot of the principles that are discussed there can be used internationally. I mean, it really comes down to your core team of agents, lenders, property managers, right?
The only country that I know about like their real estate laws is probably like China, or like,
oh wow,
you don't really know, like you don't really buy real estate there. It's mostly like you lease it for 99 years. And so the government owns all the real estate properties there. So you really can't, I guess, your family, like if you're trying to pass it down, you really can't pass it down because the government takes it back after 99 years.
I would never touch any of those properties.
Yeah.
I mean, even like, because I'm a little familiar with like Thailand and Indonesia, where they want a local to maintain 51% ownership of that. So you're kind of forced to create partnerships over there and just relinquish control. In my opinion, I wouldn't touch it. I definitely want to be able to maintain control of title. That's really important, I think.
Okay. And you say you love funding, right, in the United States. do you have any tips on like getting all sorts of types of like funding? Because I know you said that you wanted to increase your debt to income ratio on our tax. So what do you have any tips for that at all?
You're asking like any tips for being able to get lending?
Yeah, I get like if your debt to income ratio is like pretty low, or like how did you increase it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be really clear that like real estate shouldn't be like your driver for earned income, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm actually a proponent of never touching cash flow. I think cash flow should stay within the model to build out reserves. How I, for how I work, man, like I even prepay a lot of my bills, like my HOAs, all that stuff. Like I have most of that paid off for the next 18 months because, okay, fine, it's not necessarily the best use of capital, but what's the value of peace of mind for me to make sure that I can maintain solvency? So I think if you're having issues getting lending because your earned income is not high enough, well, that's your problem. You need to go focus on earned income, not lending, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, if you're just in one of those situations where you found a great deal, you know it's a good deal, there's enough meat on the bones for you and partners. Look, it there's so much money circulating, like there's so much liquidity out there to put into these types of assets that if you can find a good deal, the partners will come. But yeah, man, I mean, like with lenders, like I've worked with some really good lenders, I've worked with some really bad lenders. And I would say like my main advice is if you are self-employed, um, you would want to work with the lender who has a lot of experience working with self-employed people, like especially if you're doing conventional financing, like the 30-year fixed rate products, Fannie Mae, Fannie Mac, Freddie Mac types of products. Those are highly regulated products. Especially during COVID, there was a lot of scrutiny with self-employed borrowers. So I've had situations where my lenders were not able to finance me because
Okay.
I was self-employed and because my books were a little bit more complicated in terms of, hey, I have Florida entities, I have entities in Puerto Rico, I have other properties already. They dropped the ball. And what I realized, the reason they dropped the ball is because they're just a broker. Like they're just bidding out to other banks, but they don't necessarily, or maybe they're like a really large bank. They
Mhm.
don't necessarily have the money in house to deploy. So once I kind of realized that, I switched my strategy to only working with more boutique lenders who actually are, they're not just brokers, but they're also like the underwriters of their own mortgages, right? Like they are the ones actually deploying the capital from their own bank. That totally changed the game for me because then I was able to have like direct relationships with these lenders who understood my situation and they were able to like really take the time and kind of like buttoning up my file to be able to qualify for these conventional products. So yeah, I think if you're shopping lenders, that's going to be like really important early on is figuring out the level of expertise when it comes to self-employed borrowers. And I would only take lending from directly like from institutions. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily like working with brokers. Like if you're only a broker just bidding this thing out to 7 different banks, that's not providing me a whole lot of value. I'd rather have a relationship with somebody who can lend from their bank.
Okay. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. Basically, try to build a relationship with the bank. And do you have any advice for the 18-year-old that is trying to get, I guess, financially free, or they don't know whether trying to go to college or military or whatever they're trying to, they're just trying to figure it out, right? You probably had the same thing when you were 18, like, oh, what should I do? Right? My life just started.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my focus was definitely travel, right?
Mhm.
Like I was more focused on trying to get international experiences. Um, However I could, whether it was from study abroad or I was doing that birthright trip or I was just saving up money from lifeguarding or working my job to leave for the summers, right? But if I was like 18 years old or even older, like 24 years old, and you're like super worried about trying to make money to put into real estate, I would first ask if you have all the skills acquired that you want. Because I think like investing into yourself to get education,
Mhm.
especially now, like to get skilled up is like pretty cheap. I mean, if you want to learn how to code or do design or any of these like skill sets that are of high value, I think your return on investment of putting that money into your education to get yourself skilled up is going to provide a much better ROI than putting it into some property. So that would be my thing, is like if you're 18 years old and you got $1,000, $2,000, 5,000, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, man, I'd be reading all the books. You know, like if you want to do real estate, I'd be definitely going into bigger pockets,
Mhm.
you know, all of those assets. If you're trying to get like an online skill, right? I mean, there's so many resources to teach yourself how to code or sales, right? I'd focus on those things first. And once you're at the point where you can't possibly spend any more money on acquiring these skills, I like to think at that point you have some other opportunities lined up where you're actually producing income where you can invest that capital into, let's say, real estate at that point.
Yeah. And do you have any regrets that you wish you could have done earlier in your career?
No, I don't think I have any regrets. I mean, college was great. You know, I think meeting people is definitely a lot more important than like what you learn.
Mhm.
Like just having the connections turned out to be super valuable. You know, I quit my corporate job pretty early on because I recognized I'm like this for me to have to come to this office every single day is not aligned, you know, with me. So I quit that pretty early on, but everything was kind of like a stepping stone. Like one opportunity led me to the next opportunity to the next. But no, man, I don't think I really have any regrets in that sense.
Yeah, no problem with that. And we're gonna move on to the ending question soon here. We're just gonna go and ask the guys on the panel their question. So Dev, go ahead.
What's going on, David? How are you today?
Hey, good, Devin. Thank you.
I was just thinking, for the digital nomad lifestyle, can it be for everyone, or is it only for like a certain type of person?
I think everyone could have location independence, but I think having the desire to actually like utilize that and be traveling, I don't think that's necessarily for everybody. I think there's many people who are just who have no desire, right? Like for me, I had like a huge desire to want to go out and experience and, you know, travel. But I think somebody who just simply doesn't have that desire, I don't think they're gonna, I don't think they're gonna enjoy it as much, right?
Right. Yeah. True. Okay.
You got any more questions, Dev?
Yeah.
Go
I was
ahead.
thinking. I was thinking earlier. About like the different type of mindsets between someone who's willing to start their own business and someone who's really like stuck in their 9 to 5. So say someone was stuck in their 9 to 5 and wanted to jump into starting their own business and traveling and things like that. What would be like a first step towards doing that?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was working my 9 to 5s, I also at the same time was I was doing different startups at the time, and most of them, pretty much all of them failed. A couple of them stuck and, you know, actually like generating revenue. So I think if you're working a 9 to 5 and you're interested in starting your own business, you should work your 9 to 5 and run that business at the same time.
Right.
That's my opinion. Unless you are just completely miserable at that 9 to 5 and it's dispensable. Like for example, you know, back in like 2017, I was working for an agency doing development for them. And in the beginning it was good, but then honestly, I just became miserable there. Like the environment was not good. I wasn't learning as much. I definitely wasn't getting paid anywhere near what I was worth there. And I stuck that job through until I had another one lined up. I think that's like the only thing. It's like if you're completely miserable and it's like really messing with your mental health, look, you can find a $15, $20, $25 an hour job pretty much anywhere. Like they're there, right? So I wouldn't stay miserable in one place when it can be replaced. I do think though that before you go and permanently quit your 9 to 5 job, your side hustle, your business should at a minimum be replacing that income. That's what I did was like when I left my full-time job, it was end of April 2019. At that point, I was making a little bit more than twice from my business than I was from that job. So when I quit that job, it was like, okay, I'm going to take like a 33% income hit, but at least now I have my location independence back. I have a lot more time back. But I think just quitting your 9 to 5 without having any way of producing income, I think that's really scary. I think I think there's a lot of risk there. So that's just kind of my take on it. Like, I don't know, everyone's situation is different. Like if some way or another your food, shelter, water, and overall cost of living is covered and there's no worries about how you're going to make those bills, yeah, then in my opinion, you have nothing to lose. But if you're relying on that 9 to 5 to make those bills, I wouldn't just quit that to go start a venture. I would try to, man, in the beginning, like I was working so hard. Like I was doing like 40 hours a week and then I was putting in like another 35 into my business. Like I was just grinding all the way down. And it wasn't healthy, man. Like my mental health was there. Like I found myself getting like physically ill just from like the amount of stress and work. But and I think luck had a good part of this too. Like I was working and building things for the right people at the right time with the right skill sets. So there was like a really nice synchronicity there for me where like luck, I think, had a part to play in my journey, right? And it's like with people, you just kind of have to keep grinding until eventually you're at the place. And man, I made so many pivots. Like when one thing isn't working, after a while, it's like I don't try to beat a dead horse. Like make a change, make a pivot, move into something else. And it was those pivots that ultimately led me into a place where like, okay, I am generating enough revenue where I can leave the 9 to 5. Because when you're at that point too, you start looking at it as, okay, I'm making twice as much from my business. So if I can leave my job and get about 2/3 of my time back, in theory, if I were to just take that time and invest it into the business, I should make more money than from that job. So that's kind of how I looked at it. I wasn't the type of person that just had like no income coming in and just decided to quit the 9 to 5. I see a lot of risk in that.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to put that 70-hour work weekend. That's
Yeah,
all
man.
it takes.
Man,
But-
and it's like, and I don't even necessarily recommend doing that. Like it was just so hard, man.
Yeah.
It's like, I think for entrepreneurs, like to start something brand new, it's like, it's so challenging. I think sometimes you might have more success in today's environment to go look for businesses for sale, like struggling businesses, whether it's a coffee shop, a development company, whatever your kind of thing is, and go meet those people and figure out what the core problems are and see if you can drive some level of value to help turn around those businesses. Sometimes I think it's easier to take those approaches than start something brand new,
Being a problem solver just pays a lot more.
Yeah.
Dev, you got any more?
Oh, nah, man. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah,
no problem.
All right, we're gonna start the ending questions here. So,
Cool.
David, if you can go back in time, right, what would you tell your younger self?
Man, I had so much uncertainty in myself, and is this whole thing gonna pan out? And I still have a lot of uncertainty just when I think over the next 5 to 10 years. But if I knew what I knew now back then, I would definitely let myself know that it's all gonna be okay. It'll play out. Destiny and fate just has this crazy thing of, eventually coming together. Things tend to work out. And try not to be stuck up in your head all the time, right? Like this whole idea of analysis paralysis, just thinking of every possible idea or scenario in your head. I mean, dude, that is not good for your mental health. It is so much better to just be in a situation of doing than overthinking.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. And is there anything that you would like to ask your future self?
Yeah, man, what's the path, right? Like what's the, like, you have to, with entrepreneurship, a lot of times you have to throw so much shit on the wall and just see what sticks before you say, okay, this is working. So you're constantly like testing and trying new things and thinking of all the different scenarios and aspects of your business to drive value. Man, it would be so much easier just to talk to myself in 10 years and ask myself, so tell me exactly what worked, you know?
Yeah, that's all we wanted, don't we? And
Yeah.
what do you think the secret sauce is into becoming successful in your own, whatever you find successful? What do you think the secret sauce is?
Hmm. I think grit has a big part of it. Like you kind of in entrepreneurship, I think you have to have like a really hard chin and be able to take punches or bad news, or you have to like, I think the secret sauce is you have to look forward and try to initiate change. If you're just kind of staying in the status quo and you're running your business exactly the same way that you've been running it for the last 5 years, you're probably not going to grow. Right. So I think the secret sauce is like embracing change, looking for change. There, in my opinion, there is no value to be unlocked in the status quo. Right. So I think people who are just like really stuck in their ways, in their belief system, they have a very narrow point of view, right? And how they view the world and business and themselves and their roles within it. I mean, it's really hard to have like a highly limited mindset and I think succeed in business unless it was handed down to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. And do you have like a favorite quote that you live by?
A favorite quote.
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's like one favorite quote. However, I have been reviewing The Art of War, but not the
Like,
you got the Sun Tzu. So you got the original text, but there's actually a new one that was just kind of released called The Entrepreneur's Guide to the Art of War. I don't know if you
really?
guys can see this. Yeah, it's kind of blurry.
Yeah, it's
I
never heard of that.
written by Mark Smith. It's the original classic text interpreted for the modern business world. So I was just kind of going through here and highlighting some stuff. So I'm sure there's some great quotes in here, but no, I can't say that there's like a single quote, right? That I follow.
Okay. No problem with that. And speaking of books, is there any books that you recommend for certain situations or parts of your life? Like it could be either business or self-improvement, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think so the 4-hour work week, right? Super instrumental in just becoming aware of location independence and being a digital nomad and just kind of viewing the world more globally. I think that's a great book. I think The Art of War is really good for like just life and business, especially this translated version, because the original version, it's really hard to comprehend the old text. But in this book, it really translates it into language that I understand. What else? A lot of people recommend Rich Dad Poor Dad. Dad Poor Dad. I think that's a cool book. I don't think it was necessarily like revolutionary for me, but I think it's I think the coolest thing about that book is it highlights taxes and how different levels of professionals are taxed, right? And how ultimately you want to end up on that investor quadrant. I've read pretty much all the Bigger Pockets books. Like I think Burr was really cool and kind of understanding finance, right? And creative finance and value add. Man, there's so many of them. I was told by my mentor to pick up the book called Ishmael. I think it's called Ishmael, Ismael. Let me see.
What is that? I never heard of that.
Ishmael book.
Who's the author?
Yeah. I think it's Daniel Quinn. Yeah. Here. Yeah, it's this is less about business, and I think it's more about just philosophy and like quality of life, because that's one of the things I've been really interested in lately is when is enough money enough? What are the true pillars of quality of life that I want to live? So I don't know. I was recommended this book, so that's something I'm going to be picking up pretty soon.
Have you checked out Nassim Taleb's types of books like Anti-Fragile, Skin in the Game, and all that?
Who?
Nassim Taleb. His books are very like they're both kind of business and like philosophy type of books where it gets you thinking. It's more like a deeper level of like types of books too. So if you,
Gotcha. I don't think so. Yeah, if you want to link that to me
yeah,
after this call,
I'll
that'd
send
be
it to you
awesome.
through Instagram. Yeah, he has a whole collection that is really good, and he's one of like the top, like like what are they called? The top authors in the world, and he's like I think like in the top 10 somewhere. But
Oh, cool.
his books are really amazing. And we're gonna do our special thing here. I'm about to show you. Is that all
Oh
you have for
man.
books too?
Oh, man, there's so many of them. Like I'm just kind of, I have books between here in my office in Puerto Rico or in Orlando and Puerto Rico. Story Brand was a pretty good one.
Story Brand.
Yeah, how to influence people, how to win friends and influence people. That's good. I really like sales books. So like,
Never Split the Difference.
yeah, that one, 10x Rule. I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone's books. I do like his stuff. Third Circle Theory is really nice when you think about innovation. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm a huge fan of professional development books.
No, you're good. I like that. I respect that.
Yeah.
It just helps a lot of the viewers here to know like what type of books are out there. Do you see my screen right now, Dave?
Yeah.
All right. So
Yep.
we do the special thing where we spin the wheel, right? So let's see what you get. All right. I don't know what this one is. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite song do you listen to?
Oh man, favorite one song. I think one song alone would probably get annoying after a while, but man, I like a whole bunch of different types of music. I pretty much like everything except country music, to be honest. So I've been listening to a lot of Mac Miller lately.
Okay.
I like Mac Miller. I like Cultura Perfectica. They're over from Puerto Rico. I like Amy Winehouse, Frank Sinatra. Man, I'm kind of like all over the place.
Yeah, you're all good.
A single favorite song. I probably don't have like one favorite song, but if I had to pick just like one artist, I'd probably lean towards Mac Miller.
Okay, not bad. It's not a bad choice. And last two questions, right? First, is there anything like you want to tell your mother or father?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just super thankful for them, right? Like I'm the youngest kid, so all of my siblings are much older than me. I've always kind of grown up with older parents, but no, they've always been super supportive of a lot of my crazy ideas, like from traveling to starting my businesses to real estate, right? So super thankful for them, and yeah, want them to know
Nice.
that I love them. Yeah.
Nice. And lastly, how can people reach out to you?
I think email is fine. So I can be reached at david@brainbuffet.com.
Okay.
And then you can follow me on Instagram, which is at LO David. It's Hello David without the H.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
I'll put that all in the description as well.
All
And
right,
yeah,
cool.
that's all we got for you here, David. And thank you for coming to the podcast.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you guys. It was great talking to you guys and great to meet you.
Meet you too. Thank you.